What's happening, guys? So if you, such as myself, live in the Northeast, you know how atrocious the heat and humidity has been for the past month, which makes climbing far less enjoyable, to say the least. Thus, I'm not climbing today. Part of that is because, well, finding other people to climb with that want to brave this kind of weather, hard to come by. Anyway, but I figured I would use the time to go over what goes into my rack or building my trad rack. I've been asked by multiple people this question, and that's interesting because I remember asking the exact same question. So we'll just go right from, here's my pack. It's not a climbing pack per se, it's a backpacking pack. It's just what I've had forever, and everything's there. So we'll just get started and dive right in. So my gear I keep in bags. There's my harness, and we'll go over what's on that, why it's there. Helmet, the rack proper, or at least part of it. So that's the main stuff. This is bigger stuff. And then slings and runners. This is all draws, which we're not really going to be using too many of those, just a few. And I have another bag in here. Random assortment of shit. All right. So I'm going to put my harness on, and we'll actually go through the process of racking it up per se, assuming I am about to get on a climb. While I'm doing so, I will offer the same disclaimer I offer just about everybody that asks me about buying equipment and buying gear. No one listens to the disclaimer, but it goes like this. When you feel you are ready to teach somebody else how to use this stuff, that is the point when you should be buying gear. The reason I say that is because generally, if you don't know, if you've never been sport climbing or you've never been trad climbing, and that's we're all there at some point in time, you're going to go with somebody that does know how to do that. And I want to do the leg loops. If they know how to do it, generally, 9 times 10, they're already going to have the equipment. So there's not really much of a need for you to be buying gear. That said, nobody listens to it. I get it. No one told me that when I was learning how to do all this stuff. But in hindsight, yeah, definitely, I probably should have, knew a little bit more. But hey, I survived, so cool. So, that said, I will throw it out there. When at the point when you feel like you can actually teach somebody how to do this, that's the point when you want to be buying gear. So we'll assume that you've gotten at least enough know-how, general know-how, that you want to, then you've been sport climbing for a while, you want to get the trad climbing. Here we are. So what I have, everything here, is one could think of as a gunks rack. Generally, when you're buying gear, there is like the essentials, and we'll go over those first, that you're going to find on any trad rack. After that, it's all gear that's kind of specific to the area you're climbing in. So, first things first. On my harness, I use a Mammut, a Fear 3, by the way, and I like the harness. It's light, it's comfortable. One thing, it kind of lacks real estate, though, as far as the gear loops are concerned, and it's not really ideal for trad climbing. I didn't really come to this realization until much later, and this is just through experience. But on my harness, there's always two things. First, I have ATC, and you're always going to have an ATC. And the other thing I keep on my harness is this guy. And this is what I use for, anchoring in at the end of climbs. I use sport climbing, I use for trad climbing. It's kind of my own little thing that I've just sort of invented over time. The common way of doing it is, if I get a runner out here, is you'll take, I'll just use these, is you take a runner and you'll have, a locker or a beaner, and then people will girth it, the girth hitch right there on their harness, and they'll do that twice. Oops. So they'll have two of these guys on here, and then you'll probably like sling them between your legs and hook them into your harness, which in my case with the 2-foot runner, this gets really tight on my crotch, which is one of the reasons why I don't do it. That's fine, that works. You can also, they also sell things called personal anchor systems, which I have one and I will show you in a second here, which is more or less the same philosophy. It's just a single, this guy. So it's a bunch of links, and at the end it has like this sort of a figure 8 setup. And same deal, it girths on your harness, in the front of your harness. And then you bring it through your legs and you hook it in right here. Okay, that's fine, that works. I don't do that. I don't know when I stopped doing it. I used to do it, but this is a system I just sort of came up with because it's 2 runners, they're thin runners, it's 3 lockers, and I can use it for all sorts of things. I guess one of the hazards of doing it in this manner is that I could potentially drop this, which is not good, but that hasn't happened yet, operative word. I'm sure I'll learn after the fact. But yeah, I use this guy for, tying into the chains at top climbs, building a little belay nest. I can use it for anything. That's kind of the power of it. And that just rides with me. In the same spot on my harness all the time. This guy, always have one. Doesn't matter what you're doing, when you're doing it, always have an ATC. As far as trad climbing goes, I do have a gree-gree. I love the gree-gree. I don't really use it too much for trad climbing because when you're rappelling off, you need something you can put 2 strands of rope through, and you can't do that with a gree-gree. So, those 2 guys. Also, especially trad climbing, nut tool, and this is like the first thing you put on my harness, and I do that so I don't forget. It's not a bad idea to get a piece of cordelette. They actually make these bands that are sort of like spiral shock cords that you'd hook on your harness, and that way you can't drop your nut tool when you start like fiddling around trying to use it to get yank pieces out, which ironically enough I generally am using it more on cams than on the nuts. But yeah, always should have one, and again, that always goes in the same spot, right rear. And lastly, gearing up, I got my cordelette. So I keep it laced up like this on a single beaner. Sometimes if I have an available locker, I'll use a locker. Like I can take this one off and throw it on just to have a locker, because look, it's never a bad idea to have a lot of lockers. Yeah, again, building your belay, setting up anchors, cordelette, super useful. I used to use slings and runners here to girth like trees and building all that, and I have since stopped doing that for a few different reasons. I went out and bought some cordelette, and I used the cordelette for doing it. One of the reasons is like girthing, which I don't do very much anymore, is not good for the runners. Like you get binding or webbing on webbing, and over time that wears away, it beats up on them too much. The other reason is because it will slowly damage the bark on trees. So, least amount of impact as possible. This guy, again, goes same spot. So that's it. ATC, I have my little utility runners and lockers. I got my cordlet, I got my nut tool. That's the start. And now we're going to go into, next thing I'll generally do is start camming up the Pro. So, yeah, this is the natural state of things. Though all my cams here are in order. I use a mix between BD, Black Diamond, and Metolius. And the cams that I have, the sizes of, I mean, it's a full range of like your most commonly used cams. You know, sans the bigger stuff over here, but I double up or triple up on all those sizes that are specific to where I primarily climb at, being the gunks. I'm generally okay if I go elsewhere. I imagine if I went out west and started doing a bunch of crack climbs, then I'd probably run into issues, but I'll get into that in a second. Anyway, yeah, familiarize yourself with the area you're going to be predominantly climbing. And once done, you're going to get a sense of what sizes are needed more than others. And so when you start buying these things, you don't start buying a whole range of sizes that you're never going to use. Again, go out with somebody that already has the equipment and they've probably already made this mistake, and thus you can learn from them. So, I mean, that all said, my Metolius stuff, I use these red beaners on, and the Black Diamond, they actually have color-coded beaners. They sell these packs separately of the cam, unfortunately, but I have discovered that this is so nice to have. It just makes everything so much more efficient. In the gunks, predominantly, everything from a number 1 here to 0.4, these sizes, that also includes the Metolius number 4, number 3, and number 2. Those are your most used cams, and you can see these are the ones, like, I mean, my 0.5s right here, I have 3 of this size. I technically have 4 because this guy is about the same cam, though they have 2 different camming angles, so the range of size they can fit is different. These guys can take a little bit bigger of a range than these. But yeah, I have that more of those pieces because I'm using them more often. Generally, it's a good idea to just have doubles of everything, especially if you're going something you don't know that you've been on. I only have one number 3 because I can't think of a time where I need more than one. I have 2 number 2s, though generally I only take one with me. I used to take both, but again, like over time, and this gets into experience teaching me, I don't need 2 of them on a climb. If I'm going to be getting on a climb that I'm going to need, you know, 4 of these things, I can borrow them, you know, like I can plan ahead for that. So when I start racking up, I generally rack smallest in front to the rear, and then depending upon, and I do that for everything. So like my nuts go behind my cams. I've always done it that way. But like the small pieces, so I like having at least one of these guys. We'll start with the double 0 here, single 0. So I only have one of these 2 sizes. And we'll go one on each side right here. All right. Then the yellow. This thing, I use that a lot in the gunks. Orange, bring along, and then we get into, if I need to, I'll bring him. If I need to, I'll bring him. I don't know, for whatever reason, I don't really like this cam. I'm not really sure why. We get into the 0.4s. So I have 2 of these guys, and they'll just go one on each side. Again, I'm going from front to the rear. It's 0.5, 0.75. One there. Number 1, wide, commonly used cam. And then number 2 and the number 3. And just one on each side. And that's all the spring-loaded camming devices. My nuts. So it's always good to have a good set of nuts. It's always good to have a set of nuts, and generally these are always the first thing people buy. Nothing wrong with that at all. I can just tell you from experience, setting one of these guys, a solidly placed nut just feels good to have. You know, I'll throw it out there. Whether it's safe or not, I guess it's left to everyone's opinion, but trust me. They also work great for directionals, and the gunks especially, that's very important. So, you know, cams, if you have it, I wish I had a crack or something I can plug into here. Cams are designed to take a force in one direction. That's what they're good in. They seat themselves in that one direction very well. I bet you I can probably get a small one into the bench here. Sure I can. So, but where they don't work so well is going laterally. And you can even see there, they walk. And so taking a force laterally, it's a great idea to defer to these guys. Because you seat these guys and they just stick. You know, I have one little hex on here. So commonly in the gonks, at least I find myself taking these two guys. This one, it depends. I mean, the one thing about nuts is they get heavy, like any gear. But yeah, I mean, you bury it deep enough, you'll find some part where the constriction comes in, fits these guys. But I got two sets, one on each side, again in the rear. So that pretty much covers all of my active protection. Now, if you're a gonks climber, you are going to have a set of these guys, and these are called Tricams. They are bomber in the gonks. Apparently, especially this guy right here. And the way these work is they are active camming devices, by the way. So if I fold this over in that little channel right there, and I place it into the constriction as such, that thing there will it'll probably fuse itself into the crack on a fall event, but hey, that's a good thing. That means it's not popping out. The problem with these guys is, one, they can be a little cumbersome to place, and they can be really cumbersome to take back out of the rock. So I have not fallen on one of these guys yet. I don't want to, but I have them around because I generally don't use them. 9 times out of 10, I'm not taking them up. But if I'm on something really hard and I want a little peace of mind, I will absolutely bring these things. They're a good thing to have. Again, this is a gonks like champion piece right here. You know, somebody else can, you know, I'm sure they can leave a comment or something. They can tell me if they're awesome in vertical cracks or in other areas as well. You know, I can just tell you from my experience, like, yeah, that's like a gonks, I wouldn't say necessity, but it is something you want around. But, yeah, so I guess in terms of I haven't gone over the big pieces yet. So, yeah, I mentioned I keep everything in bags. Most people do much like this. They have a sling and they kind of just clip their gear to it. And that's fine. I mean, to each his own. I keep them in bags because everything gets stuffed into the pack and it doesn't tangle together. You know, which it did when I used to keep my stuff this way. But, yeah, as far as the big, I don't generally take the cowbells up anything unless I know that there's some really solid placement for one. I've been on a few climbs where it's necessary. 3 Pines, I think, takes a solid, this guy is great on the top, on the upper pitch of that. Beginner's Delight, I think, takes this guy. I don't even know what they're called, to tell you the truth. What, 9, 8? I use them so seldomly. And the number 4 and the 3.5, this guy's a little harder to find nowadays. I've used them both once, I think. I don't, what, Baby, I think, takes the number 4. It might be number 5. I'm not sure. I seldomly use them, but, I mean, it's nice to have around if I'm going to get on a climb, which will take a, one of these things. I took this guy up Cannon Cliff and never used it, never placed it, never found the chance to. So I guess the only reason I say that is if you're looking to start buying Pro, then, these guys should be last on that list. Not that it will be a bad deal if you do buy it. If you do end up one of these things and you rack it on, look, if it's heavy and you don't want it around, just plug it early in the climb. That's fine. Save the weight. At least then you have something in the rock wall. But yeah, so that's about everything for the protection. We'll move on to slings and runners. So these guys, especially if you're climbing in the gunks, you just want a ton of these things. And it has to do with the style of climbing in that area. Because you're not following a crack over the course of a climb, you tend to get your Pro meanders back and forth over whatever your route line is. And as I said, since cams don't take lateral forces very well, we extend out the beaner here to the ropes so it can mitigate that lateral force. Anyway, you're going to want a whole lot of these things. They come in 2 flavors. You can get Dyneema, which is what this is. You can also get nylon, and there is pros and cons to both. This stuff is probably going to be a lot more durable. For making Alpine configurations, Dyneema tends to work a little bit better because it's thinner. Hey, to each his own. Every runner I have in here, and these are 2-foots, by the way, I have 2 beaners on. Now, you can probably get away with one, especially if you take some draws with you.